All right, good morning, tiny people at home, if there are any of you. All right, here we go. The Latter-day Saints, go find that on your review sheets. And this is a new religion and an American religion. It's the only major worldwide religion which is founded and based in America. That's the reason we study it. Okay, Mormons, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Latter-day is hyphenated. Members of the Church, capital C, of Jesus Christ, capital J, capital C, of Latter-day, capital L, hyphen, capital D, Saint. Latter is L-A-T-T-E-R. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's what the actual name of it is. They have a religious text called the Book of Mormon. And that's why they're referred to as Mormons. All right, Joseph Smith. In the early 1800s in New York, he had a vision of God leading him to a set of golden tablets upon which was written the Book of Mormon, another book of the Bible. It's not really, another testament of Jesus. Another testament of Jesus.
Yeah.
Hang on. Jesus supposedly visited the New World. Smith later went on to evoke polygamy and other unpopular tenets. He was killed in eastern Illinois along with his brother Hiram. Here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
In early 1800s.
In the early 1800s.
Tammy.
Wait, can you repeat Latter-day Saints?
That's it. Members of the Latter-day Saints is just a new American religion. Okay, Joseph Smith in the early 1800s in New York.
What?
In the early 1800s in New York. Yes. He had a vision of God, that'd be a capital G, just one. He had a vision of God leading him to a set of golden tablets. In the early 1800s in New York, he had a vision of God, capital G, leading him to a set of golden tablets. In the early 1800s in New York, he had a vision of God leading him to a set of golden tablets, upon which was written the Book of Mormon, capital B, capital M. Upon which was written the Book of Mormon. In the early 1800s in New York, he had a vision of God leading him to a set of golden tablets, upon which was written the Book of Mormon, comma, another testament of Christ. Another testament of Christ. One more time, just so people understand, you don't have to write this down right now. In the Bible, it's divided into two testaments. The Old Testament, the New Testament. That's before Jesus came in Jesus' life. This said, there's another one. There's another part of the Bible that you're all missing. Okay, all right. In the early 1800s in New York, he had a vision of God leading him to a set of golden tablets upon which was written the Book of Mormon, another testament of Christ. Jesus supposedly visited the New World. Jesus supposedly visited the New World. Again, I'm not making a judgment on your religion if you happen to be a Mormon. I'm just kind of record history. Jesus supposedly visited the New World. Smith later went on to evoke polygamy. That means to say polygamy was a good thing. P-O-L-Y-G-A-M-Y. P-O-L-Y-G-A-M-Y. And polygamy means a man can have as many wives as he can afford. Jesus supposedly visited the New World. Smith later went on to evoke polygamy and other unpopular tenets. T-E-N-E-T-S. That means basic ideas. Smith later went on to evoke polygamy, P-O-L-Y-G-A-M-Y, means many marriages, and other unpopular tenets. Gus, chair down. T-E-N-E-T-S. He was killed in eastern Illinois along with his brother Hiram. Yes, sir.
Can you repeat the Smith later went on to revoke polygamy and other.
You mean the things I do all the time? Keep repeating it?
Yeah.
Yes, I will do that. Okay. He was killed in eastern Illinois along with his brother Hiram. In the early 1800s in New York, he had a vision of God leading him to a set of golden tablets upon which was written the Book of Mormon, another testament of Christ. Jesus supposedly visited the New World, that'd be capital N, capital W. Smith later went on to evoke polygamy and other unpopular tenets, Tenets. Smith later went on to evoke polygamy and other unpopular tenets. He was killed in eastern Illinois along with his brother Hiram. He was killed in eastern Illinois along with his brother Hiram.
How do you spell Hiram?
Capital Hyrum. Capital Hyrum. Brigham Young, second leader of the Mormon Church, that'd be capital M, second leader of the Mormon Church. He led thousands to their new home, Salt Lake, in what's now Utah. Second leader of the Mormon Church, he led thousands to their new home at the Great Lake, at the Great Salt Lake, in what is now Utah.
We're still on Joseph Smith, right?
Nope, we're on Brigham Young. Brigham Young, second leader of the Mormon Church. He led thousands to their new home at the Great Salt Lake in what is now Utah. And the Great Salt Lake is capitalized. That's the name of the thing.
Second leader of.
Go ahead.
He was the second leader of what?
The Mormon Church. He led thousands to their new home at the Great Salt Lake in what is now Utah. Texas, originally Spanish, then part of Mexico. Texas, originally Spanish, Spanish is capitalized, then part of Mexico. Texas, originally Spanish, then part of Mexico. Mm-hmm. Texas War for Independence. You're going to have to ask somebody else if you're back with the Mormons, Hamza. We got to keep going here, buddy. Texas War for Independence. Not a U.S. war. This is Mexicans versus Texans. The Mexican War for Independence. Not a U.S. war. This is Mexicans versus Texans. Texas War for Independence. This is not a U.S. war. This is Mexicans versus Texans. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. Dictator of Mexico on occasions. He was a great organizer but poor general. Dictator of Mexico on occasion. He's the guy that kept getting kicked out and brought back. Dictator of Mexico on occasion. He was a great organizer, but a poor general. He was a great organizer, but a poor general. General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, dictator of Mexico on occasion. He was a great organizer, but a poor general. Sam Houston, leader of the Texans and first president of the Republic of Texas. Leader of the Texans and first president of the Republic of Texas. Leader of the Texans and first president of the Republic of Texas. Sam Houston, leader of the Texans and first president of the Republic of Texas. Republican Texas would both be capitalized, as would Texans. Omar.
For the exams, we have to know like the trails and like who made them and stuff. Texas.
The trails and who made, you mean like the Santa Fe Trail and the Oregon Trail? Yes. I mean, that's just a really broad term. You don't have to remember like Zebulon Pike unless he's on Okay, Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, William Travis, the Texan heroes of the Alamo. Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, and William Travis, the Texan heroes of the Alamo.
How do you spell Alamo?
Capital ALAMO. Just like the car rental company. The Alamo, Goliad,
Who wrote
San Jacinto, those are three big battles in the Texas War for Independence.
I think one time we, never mind.
Okay,
That was a
never
long
mind.
story, but no time for that.
Right. Gotta push on. We gotta give you guys information so I can plug all the kids. The Alamo, Goliad, and San Jacinto, three big battles of the war. The Mexican-American War. U.S. versus Mexico in a border dispute war. U.S. versus Mexico in a border dispute war. U.S. versus Mexico in a border dispute war. The disputed boundary was between the Nueces and the Rio Grande. Disputed boundary was between the Nueces, capital N-U-E-C-E-S, capital N-U-E-C-E-S River. River's part of the name of it, so it'd be capitalized. Between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande, capital R-I-O space, capital G-R-A-N-D-E. Disputed boundary is between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande. Yes, sir.
Technically in Spanish it would be Big Rio or something.
The big river.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a big river. Okay. Training for the generals of the Civil War. Lee, Grant, Sherman, etc. Lee, Grant, Sherman, etc. Now remember, we're under Mexican-American War. And this says training for the generals of the Civil War. This is where these guys became really good officers, where they really learned their trade of being soldiers and killing people, which they managed to do in huge numbers against each other a few years later. Winfield Scott, Zachary Taylor, two leading U.S. generals. Taylor had ambition and was ordered to hold. Scott took Mexico City. Two leading U.S. generals. Taylor had ambition and was ordered to hold. Remember, he wanted to be and became president. Taylor had ambition and was ordered to hold. Scott took Mexico City. Winfield Scott, Zachary Taylor, two leading U.S. generals. Taylor had ambition and was ordered to hold. Scott took Mexico City. Treaty gives the U.S. the southwestern U.S., and that was the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which is capital G-U-A-D-A-L-U-P-E hyphen capital H-I-D-A-L-G-O. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, capital G-U-A-D-A-L-U-P-E hyphen capital H-I-D-A-L-G-O. Treaty gives the U.S. the southwestern United States. That's the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo.
Huh?
Gadsden Purchase. Several years later, the U.S. bought another sliver of northern Mexico, completing the present boundary of the U.S. Several years later, the U.S. bought another sliver of northern Mexico, completing the present boundary of the U.S. The Gadsden Purchase. Several years later, the U.S. bought another sliver of northern Mexico, completing the present boundary of the U.S. The Gadsden Purchase. Several years later, the U.S. bought another sliver of northern Mexico, completing the present boundary of the U.S. Education of women. From care of the home to formal education. From care of the home to formal education. Education of women from care of the home to formal education. Then you need to list two people and what they did. Mary Lyon. Mary Lyon, Lyon. She started Mount Holyoke College. Mary Lyon, Lyon, started Mount, capital M-O-U-N-T, Holyoke, capital H-O-L-Y-O-K-E, Mount Holyoke College. All three words would be capitalized. And Sarah Pierce, capital P-I-E-R-C-E. Sarah Pierce started Litchfield Female Academy, capital L-I-T-C-H-F-I-E-L-D, capital L-I-T-C-H-F-I-E-L-D, Female Academy. All three would be capitalized. The education of women from care of the home to formal education. Mary Lyon started Mount Holyoke College. Sarah Pierce started Litchfield Female Academy. Life in the mills, from great conditions to wage slaves because of competition cost cutting. Hamza, I repeat everything. I repeat it lots. You don't have to say what every time, okay? Life in the mills, from great conditions to wage slaves because of competition cost cutting. From great conditions, remember they had dorms and matrons, one of them published a literary magazine, they had good wages. From great conditions to wage slaves. That's people that work huge numbers of hours for almost no pay. From great condition to wage slaves because of competition cost cutting. Cost cutting is hyphenated. Cost-cutting. From great conditions to wage slaves because of competition cost cutting. Remember when the mills were making just tons of money, they could afford to pay the girls all these things when they came to work in the mill. But as more and more mills came, they had to lower their prices because of the competition, which meant they had to lower their costs, and they did that on the backs of the workers. They took away the good wages, and they took away the dorms, and those became tenements, and they took away the matrons to watch out over the young ladies, and they, of course, canceled the literary magazine and everything. So it became a nasty place to work from having been a great place to work. From great conditions to wage slaves because of competition cost cutting. Slavery, you don't need anything next to slavery, you guys know what slavery is. The Compromise of 1850 tried to avoid the conflict through diplomacy. Tried to avoid the conflict through diplomacy. Tried to avoid the conflict through diplomacy. The Compromise of 1850 tried to avoid the conflict through diplomacy. D-I-P-L-O-M-A-C-Y. Compromise of 1850 tried to avoid the conflict through diplomacy. The Kansas-Nebraska, please cross out act or bill and put down act.
Already a fact.
Okay, thanks.
Huh?
I got it before I ran off. Good job. The Kansas-Nebraska Act, popular sovereignty used to get Stephen Douglas votes. Popular, P-O-P-U-L-A-R, sovereignty, S-O-V-E-R-E-I-G-N-T-Y, S-O-V-E-R-E-I-G-N-T-Y. Popular sovereignty used to get Stephen Douglas votes. Stephen, in this case, is capital S-T-E-P-H-E-N, capital S-T-E-P-H-E-N, and Douglas has two S's on the end. Popular sovereignty used to get Stephen Douglas votes. Remember, he wanted to get some votes from the South because he really wanted to be president in the 1860 election. Bleeding Kansas, Civil War, lowercase c, lowercase w. Civil war between free soilers and border ruffians introduces John Brown. Civil war, lowercase c, lowercase w, between free soilers, capital F-R-E-E hyphen, capital SOILERS, free soilers and border ruffians, border and ruffian both capitalized. Civil war between free soilers and border ruffians introduces John Brown. John Brown. Come on, let me see your John Brown one more time. Flash me those eyeballs. Yeah. Yes, Hamza.
How do you spell border ruffian?
Capital BORDER, space, capital RUFFIANS. Senator Sumner attack.
Wait, hold on.
Introduces John Brown. Senator Sumner attacked. Beaten by a representative whose uncle he had attacked verbally. Senator Sumner attacked. Beaten by a representative. That would be a capital R because we're talking about the title of someone in the House of Representatives. Beaten by a representative whose uncle he had attacked verbally. Beaten by a representative whose uncle he had attacked verbally. Senator Sumner attacked. Remember, he was an abolitionist and he was attacking a guy that was pro-slavery in a debate when that guy wasn't there. So that guy's nephew came over and beat him up with a cane. Are you just doing human origami? Or? Yes.
For all of these, are we gonna have to look on and see if deeper? Or
You have to understand what this means. So you can't just memorize words. So you have to understand. Yes, Hamza.
By being by a representative, what does it mean by beaten? Like verbally or?
Beaten. They took a cane and beat him until he was in the hospital for about a year.
Oh,
At least he was home recovering. They didn't use hospitals quite the same way back then. Senator Sumner attacked, beaten by a representative whose uncle he had attacked verbally. Cool. The Dred Scott decision. A slave brought to a free area, the Supreme Court decision ended the idea of free states. Dred Scott decision, a slave brought to a free area, the Supreme Court decision ended the idea of free states. A slave brought to a free area, the Supreme Court decision ended the idea of free states. Dred Scott decision, remember Dred Scott was the man's name. A slave brought to a free area, and the abolitionists had hoped that the Supreme Court decision would be, if you get a slave to a free area, he becomes free. They got exactly the opposite. The Supreme Court decision ended the idea of free states. They pretty much said a slave's a slave anywhere. Okay. So, the Civil War. Hi, Tandy, you having fun yet? No? Oh, Tandy. I thought this was like Christmas and Easter all the time. Ready, Talam? Get that puppy sharpened now? All right, here we go. The Civil War in general terms. You have to have just the general idea of what we've talked about. I'm not going to ask you to describe a battle. I'm not going to ask you casualties here or casualties there. But you have to have a general idea of what went on in the Civil War. First of all, Civil War. Lowercase c, lowercase w there. What does that mean?
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. Gus, you raised your hand, I called on you, then you fell over sideways. Yes, Annalise?
So the Civil War with two lowercase means just like, I forgot the exact definition, but it's
Come
not,
close.
but it's two groups fight on the, I'm just gonna say what it is with two capital letters. So with two capital letters, it's the Civil War, like, the South versus the North.
Okay, that's capital ones.
But
What's the
then,
lowercase ones? Abdul?
Any battle between two types of groups. No.
There's a little bit more to it. Talal?
Battles between two groups in the same
Battles between two groups within the same country. So Civil War can be any of those, like Bleeding Kansas was a civil war, lowercase c, lowercase w. It's a fight between groups within a country, the Border Ruffians and the Free Soilers. The Civil War, capital C, capital W, was still a civil war, lowercase c, lowercase w. If you look at it from the northern point of view. If you look at it from the southern point of view, what is it? Just a war between two countries. The southern point of view was they were a separate nation. They're conquered. Yes.
Can you repeat the definition that Talal said?
For what were you defining? Lowercase c, lowercase w?
Yeah.
Just a fight between two groups within a country. Okay, economics. You have to know the northern advantages. Okay, I'm not going to make you remember the percentages, but you have to remember the North had more white population. They had more railroad tracks. They had more bank deposits. They had more factories. So those were huge economic advantages. Yes, Hamza?
Don't forget that slavery honestly killed the South's economy.
Yeah, we'll get there. Don't worry, buddy. Talal, I said white population, railroad mileage, bank deposits, factories. Okay, white population, remember, not only could the South have fewer guys to begin with, but they couldn't send them all to battle because they had to keep the slaves. Someone had to be back inside their country, keeping the slaves from rebelling. Bank deposits, that means that loans could be made to factories, to build railroads, to build canals and such, to loan to the government to finance the war. That was a huge advantage. We said, what else was there? White population, railroad mileage, just the fact that the North could move things around much further, much faster than the South could, everything from armies to food for their troops. And then the last thing was, what do we have? We have
Factors.
factories, yes, the ability of the North to produce the goods of war, uniforms, cannons, cannonballs, railroad tracks, that was an enormous economic advantage. Okay, also under economics, you had the Anaconda Plan. That was the Northern plan to strangle the South economically. And you need to remember the 4 parts: to cut off all trade north to south, to put a naval blockade around the Confederate coast to stop trade with the rest of the world. And just saying naval blockade is not enough. That's just memorizing 2 words. It's not explaining to me that you know what it means. To capture and control the Mississippi River, cutting the Confederacy in half. That cuts off trade with the West and Mexico. And finally, to squeeze the Eastern Confederacy into submission. The costs to each side. All I really want you to remember is that the North lost far more men, but a far smaller percentage of men, because the population of the South was so much smaller. And they also spent many millions more on the war. Yes, sir.
So basically, in war reforms, 1% of the North has less value, like if they die or not.
That is exactly the arithmetic of war. Remember, it doesn't matter how many people we're losing as long as we're killing Confederates, because they will run out of guys before we do. Now, did people really think they were worth less? No, they were just using an economic advantage.
It's saying never mind.
Okay, Abdul,
Never mind.
I think you can. Would you like to try?
Yes.
Go for it. Give it your best shot.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, the benefits. The benefits, the South didn't have any benefits really from the Civil War, except of course they would eventually get a different kind of an economy, but they really didn't get any benefits. The North did. Economically, the growth of industry in the North, remember, jumped a whole generation in just 4 years. So talking about economics in the Civil War, the benefits to the North were large. And the economics, Sherman's March to the Sea, this is the desire to destroy the economy of the South for 100 years, which he successfully did. The economy of the South would not recover for more than a century. General officers, you need to know the biggies. The two biggest of the biggies, of course, are Ulysses Grant, and his greatness was understanding his advantages numerically and taking those, using those, and winning the war. Lee's genius, and part of that was understanding the people that he faced. He knew and understood the weaknesses of his opponents. Then you need to know the biggies. Let's name a few of the biggies. I don't know if we'll get them all. Name a few of the biggies.
George McClellan.
George McClellan was a biggie. Talal, name another biggie. Don't ask me a question.
Okay. Powell.
What?
Henry Hine.
Henry Halleck. Name another biggie, Gus.
Winfield Scott, kind of.
Winfield Scott. Yep. Name another biggie.
Me again?
Sure.
Ambrose Burnside.
Ambrose Burnside. Okay. Who else has got another biggie?
Joe Johnston.
Joe Johnston.
PGT Beauregard.
PGT Beauregard was big. Who else? Who else have we got? Omar?
Jeb Stewart.
Okay. Jeb Stewart. Who else? Who else? Who else?
Sherman.
Oh, yeah. William Sherman. Absolutely. We talked. Yes, ma'am.
George Meade.
George Meade. First guy to beat Lee right straight up at Gettysburg. Okay. I'll let you peek through your notebooks on that. Did they give you, you guys have your notebooks back, right?
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of, wait a minute, we have Washington. Sawyer and Hamza, no Sawyer today. Sawyer and Hamza. Hamza, I don't have your notebook. I can't give you anything but a 0 if I don't have your notebook. Okay, Annalise, did you get your tissue?
Thank you.
Hello.
Can you repeat?
Repeat what? Grant, his greatness was understanding his advantage and using it. Thank you, sir.
Steal my notebook.
And Lee, what?
Huh?
What'd you say?
I said steal my notebook as a joke.
I will. Okay, and Lee, his genius was understanding his opponents. Then the biggies, we named a few of them, but there are several more. Major actions, you have to know what happened at Gettysburg. You have to know what happened at Fort Sumter. In the Peninsular Campaign, Monitor versus Virginia, the arithmetic of war. Let's talk about the arithmetic of war. What was the arithmetic of war? Omar.
I'm sorry for that. The North can, all it has to do to win is to keep on killing the Confederates. Even if they lose more men, the Confederates don't have that much, so they'll still lose.
Right. They will eventually just run out of an army. All right, cool. Presidents and political organization. The presidents, this is Civil War. We're talking about who's the president of the North. Abraham Lincoln. And he has a fairly strong central government. Then you have the president of the South, Jefferson Davis, and he has a very weak central government. It's a confederation, powers in the state governments. Okay, the search for allies. I'm just going to explain this one to you. The search for allies, the South thought they would gain European allies because of their cotton. They thought those countries like Britain and France that wanted to use their mills, get that economic power going, that they would come in on their side, sweep away the Northern Navy, and the South would win and become independent. Did not happen though. They thought that if they went up north, the Southerners thought if they went up north and won an offensive battle, that they might get those European allies. Also didn't happen. They were turned back at Sharpsburg and at Gettysburg. All right, let's see here. The Emancipation. Remember, Abraham Lincoln issued this in 1862, saying anybody still fighting, this is the Emancipation Proclamation, anybody still fighting in 1863, January 1st, we're declaring that your slaves are all free. And emancipation means freed from bondage, freeing the slaves. Invasions, there were two of them. First, Lee went north up to Antietam, and the reason he did that was to bring the destruction of war up north. And what was the other reason?
Get European allies.
Get European allies. For the second invasion, they had the same two reasons. And what was the third reason for the second invasion?
To stop the
To stop Grant from taking Vicksburg. Okay, reasons for doing things. Why fight at all? Why'd they fight at all?
to become a free country.
The South did it to become a free country, and the North did it to unify and to free the slaves, and then there was some, and then also, for a Republican form of government.
Excellent. Okay, that's it. The South wanted to keep the economic system they had with slavery, so they wanted to be a separate country. That's the only reason they fought. They wanted to be a separate country, keep their economy going. The North did it for the three reasons Annalise said. First, just to unify the country. Second, to unify the country and to free the slaves. Third, to unify the country, free the slaves, and see that a Republican form of government worked. And originally it was to unify the country. It changed to freeing the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation, and it changed to also being defending a Republican form of government with the Gettysburg Address. Okay, why start the war? Why did they start the war?
Because they knew it would break out at some point.
Well, they were pretty sure it'd break out at some point.
Because they couldn't pay compensation for the slaves. They needed to find a way to get rid of the slaves, and the South wasn't going to let the North do anything to the slaves unless they fought a war.
Okay, so what did they think the war would be? Omar?
Short and really quick.
It-
One more battle.
It would be their cheapest option. Okay, because each side was convinced it would win. And why end the war?
Too much death.
Expand on that a little bit, Gus.
Too many people died.
So the North was, why they ended because too many people died?
Yeah, the South lost.
The South lost. That's why they ended the war. They couldn't fight anymore. I mean, they were down to old men and boys running around very poorly equipped, massively outnumbered. It was over. They were just defeated. Okay, Reconstruction. We may get into a little Reconstruction, but do remember we will definitely cover the Lincoln assassination. Okay, here's the skinny. Let's see, we've got, is this supposed to be review week or is next week supposed to be review week?
Next week.
Next week is review week. Okay, we will have a chance to do some Reconstruction. Yes, I am going to continue on with some Reconstruction stuff. That's what we'll be doing. Maybe I'll get it all in tomorrow. Maybe for the next 2 days, we'll be doing the Lincoln assassination. And then we're going to start just some basics of Reconstruction. Remember, this is a 2-year course. Mr. Goddard will come back and he'll be talking about some of this stuff. And my guess is it might not be a bad idea to keep this and just glance at it right at the start of next year, just to kind of throw some of these names and items back into your head before Mr. Goddard starts. Okay, thank you, ma'am. You can turn it on.